Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take, well, a whole heap of interesting information and try to boil it down to what really matters for you. Today, we're getting into a concept that I bet many of you have heard, maybe from a friend or a therapist or just, floating around in pop culture. Name it to tame it. It's this incredibly intuitive idea, isn't it? That if you can just put a name, a label on your feelings, you somehow get a handle on them.
Right.
It sounds so simple, almost, well, maybe too simple, but it really builds on that older wisdom that just talking about feelings helps.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been sort of a cornerstone in talk therapy for, over a century, way before we had formal research on it.
And even things like keeping diaries, right? People did that for ages, understanding intuitively that writing feelings down, naming them privately helps.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving deep into today, the actual science behind this thing called emotional awareness. We're really focusing on how tracking and naming your feelings specifically can be this powerful strategy for better self-regulation. So that involves peeling back the layers, understanding what's really going on inside when emotions pop up, the honestly surprising role language plays. And we'll even get into some newer, more complex research that, well, it kind of challenges that simple name it idea.
Right, add some nuance. So our mission for this deep dive is basically to unpack this whole concept. We'll look at how the brain actually responds when you name an emotion. We'll explore these different levels, these depths of emotional awareness. And here's where it gets really, really interesting, I think. We're going to look at some surprising research that kind of throws a wrench in the works. It shows the picture is, well, way more nuanced than just name it and poof, it's tamed.
Yeah, it's not quite that straightforward sometimes.
So what does all this mean for you? For your emotional well-being, how you deal with feelings day to day? Let's try and unravel that paradox together.
The intuitive power of name it to tame it, a neuroscientific foundation.
Okay, so let's start with that core idea, naming for control. The phrase itself, name it to tame it, it's widely credited to Dr. Dan Siegel. He's a psychiatrist and expert in interpersonal neurobiology.
Right.
And his method is really built on this foundation. If you consciously identify, actually verbalize your emotions, you can start to regulate them. It sounds so simple, doesn't it? It just feels right somehow.
It really does. And the effect, the immediate impact, can be pretty profound. Psychologist David Rock, he stated that just noticing, just naming your emotional state can cut stress by up to 50%.
Wow, 50%. That's huge.
It is huge. And the mechanism behind it is creating what's called psychological distance. It's this vital shift where if you can see the emotion, label it, you don't have to be it anymore. You're not completely swallowed by it.
I see. So it's like stepping back a bit.
Exactly. It's not about squashing your feelings or pretending they aren't there. It's about creating a little bit of breathing room between you and the feeling's intensity. That lets you understand them better and then respond in a way that leads to more clarity, more resilience, and ultimately just better well-being.
Okay.
And like you said, while this idea has been around forever in therapy, we now have formal research into affect labeling that's actually quantifying some of these effects, like seeing measurable drops in how intense people say they feel an emotion.
Okay, let's unpack that neuroscience bit because it still feels a little like magic, right? How does just saying a word like, okay, I feel frustrated or I feel anxious, actually change brain chemistry or activity? What's the brain doing?
Yeah, it's fascinating. Definitely not magic. It's neuroscience. So when we get emotionally overwhelmed, our brain, it shifts gears, right, into high alert. This means the amygdala gets really active. That's the almond-shaped bit deep inside, kind of our emotional processing hub, especially for fear and stress.
The smoke detector of the brain, sort of?
That's a great way to put it, yeah. So the amygdala fires off, sending alarm signals through the nervous system,
right,
triggering that fight, flight, or freeze response we all know. And in that state, your ability to think rationally just tanks, basically, because the brain's priority number one is survival, not logical analysis.
Right. Hard to think straight when you're panicking.
Exactly. And at the same time, the prefrontal cortex, that's the part right behind your forehead, the CEO of the brain, responsible for planning, decision-making, emotional regulation, it actually becomes less active.
Okay, so the CEO checks out when the alarm goes off.
Pretty much. That's why it's so hard to calm down or think clearly when you're super emotional. But here's the kicker, the shift. The act of naming the emotion, even just thinking the word, it kicks the prefrontal cortex back into gear. That activation then helps regulate or sort of dampen down the amygdala's alarm signals. It redirects the brain's resources, slowing the amygdala's response.
Wow.
And studies show this prefrontal activation can happen incredibly fast. We're talking within 0.3 seconds.
zero point 0.3, that's almost instant. So just putting a word to it flips a switch.
It's remarkably fast. It's like hitting a neurological pause button on that immediate, raw reaction.
That's incredible. Is there solid proof for this, like brain scans?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We have concrete neural evidence. Studies using fMRI scans consistently show it. When people verbally label their emotions, you see less activity in the amygdala.
Okay.
And at the same time, more activity ramps up in the prefrontal cortex. They've even measured this dampening effect on the amygdala within about 5 to 7 seconds of the labeling.
5 to 7 seconds, that's still really quick.
It is. It means language is this powerful tool your brain uses to shift gears from pure reactivity towards more rational, considered processing. It's literally transferring control from the reactive part to the thinking part.
Okay, so it changes brain activity. Does it change anything else, like physically?
Yes, definitely. The effects ripple outwards. We see real physiological changes, too. Labeling emotions leads to lower stress responses, things like reduced skin conductance.
Which is like sweatiness.
Yeah, basically how much your palms are sweating, a classic stress sign, and also decreased levels of cortisol, the main stress hormone.
Right.
And what's really interesting is how specific you are matters. Using precise words, like saying you feel outcome-focused apprehension instead of just vague panic, has been shown to cut cortisol spikes by about 18% more effectively.
18% more, just by using a more specific word.
Exactly. Think about public speaking jitters. If your heart's pounding, internally labeling that as performance adrenaline instead of generalized panic can actually lower your physical arousal. There was a study just last year, 2023, showing participants who described their anxiety as outcome uncertainty had an 18% lower spike in their heart rate.
Fascinating. So precision counts.
It really seems to. And naming emotions is also linked to increased alpha brainwaves. Those are associated with calm focus, and it can trigger the release of GABA.
GABA, that's the neurotransmitter that kind of chills the brain out.
Precisely. It acts like the brain's brakes, inhibiting excessive neural activity, so it helps quiet down that internal noise.
Okay, this is making so much sense now. I actually had this experience once, stuck in awful traffic, just gridlocked. And I was getting so worked up, clenching the wheel, feeling that rage build.
Oh, we've all been there.
Totally. And I kept thinking, I'm so mad, this is infuriating, which just made it worse, obviously. But then I remembered reading something about this naming thing. So I took a breath and I deliberately thought, okay, I am feeling frustrated right now, specifically frustrated. Because I'm stuck, I'll be late, and I can't control it. And it was weird, but just naming it frustration, not just vague anger, seemed to do something. I physically felt my shoulders drop a bit.
Yeah.
I turned on the radio, and the rest of the drive, still slow, was just less awful. It really felt like naming it created that little bit of distance you mentioned, shifted me from being in it to observing it.
That is a perfect real-world example of exactly how it works. It's not just in a lab setting. And we see this in other places too, like work environments. For instance, some teams started using really precise terms like priority mismatches instead of just saying, we have problems.
Okay.
And they reported 33% fewer misunderstandings on projects. One manager specifically said it helped them get to the actual root cause instead of just complaining vaguely.
So addressing insufficient communication on X rather than things are a mess.
Exactly. Specificity leads to solutions. Another example. A trial in a Lee's hospital found nurses using this kind of precise emotional labeling had 22% lower burnout rates.
22% lower burnout, that's significant for nurses.
Hugely significant. One nurse shared that just naming her feeling of overwhelm as temporary resource strain helped make really tough shifts feel more manageable. It reframed it.
From a personal failing to a situational challenge.
Precisely. And beyond that immediate calming, affect labeling has broader, long-term payoffs. It really boosts your self-awareness, your emotional intelligence. It empowers you to process emotions better, solve problems more adaptively. Research consistently links higher emotional awareness to better mental health outcomes, handling stress, anxiety, depression more effectively.
And it gets easier with practice, presumably.
Absolutely. Regular practice strengthens these neural pathways. One study found people reduce their emotional intensity by 40% after just 6 weeks of daily labeling exercises.
40% in 6 weeks.
Yeah. It builds what researchers call linguistic resilience. That's basically your ability to use language to reframe overwhelming feelings into challenges you can actually tackle and bounce back faster.
Okay, so the big takeaway here seems to be naming an emotion, even silently, acts like your brain's quick pause button on that primal reaction. It shifts power to your thinking brain almost instantly, creates distance and builds this linguistic resilience. That's pretty profound stuff.
The depths of emotional awareness beyond simple labels.
And that idea, linguistic resilience, really makes me think it suggests it's not just about grabbing any label, right? Maybe it's about developing a richer, more a precise vocabulary for our inner world.
Exactly.
Because sometimes just saying I'm stressed feels, well, flat. It doesn't capture it. You know you're feeling more, but the words aren't there. Which leads us nicely into this really interesting idea about different depths of emotional understanding. It's not just on or off, it's more like a gradient.
That's a perfect way to put it, a gradient. And this is where Richard D. Lane's theory comes in his cognitive developmental theory of emotional awareness. He patterned it after Piaget's stages of cognitive development in kids, how thinking gets more complex over time.
Right, like moving from concrete objects to abstract ideas.
Exactly. Think about describing taste. First is just yummy or yucky. Then maybe sweet or sour. Eventually you can say, notes of caramel, hint of sea salt, slightly bitter finish. Emotional awareness develops similarly through 5 distinct levels. And this isn't just about your thoughts about emotions. It's about the actual complexity of how you experience and describe them. There's even a scale for it, the Ailey-A's levels of emotional awareness scale. Your score reflects how sophisticated your emotion concepts are and how naturally you tune into and use them.
5 levels. Okay, let's break those down. What do they look like?
All right, so level 1 is all about somatic sensations or visceromotor activity. At this base level, emotions are basically just raw bodily feelings. People might describe physical cues, or they might not even be able to name an emotion. They'll say things like, I feel a tightness in my chest, or my hands are clammy.
So just the physical signal, the raw data, before any interpretation, like a gut feeling.
Precisely. Uninterpreted sensation. Then comes level 2, action tendencies, or somatomotor activity. Here, emotions are described more in terms of urges to act like wanting to approach something or avoid it. These urges have a very general good-bad feeling, but no specific emotion name yet.
Like, I just want to run away, or I feel like yelling.
Exactly. You feel an urge, a pull towards or away, but you haven't labeled the why as fear or anger yet. Then, level 3 is individual feelings. This is probably what most people think of when they hear name your emotions. You experience and label a discrete, specific feeling. But the description is often quite simple, maybe a bit one-dimensional, like, I feel angry, I feel sad, I feel happy. Clear labels, but maybe not the whole picture.
Okay, so level 3 is getting the basic label. What's next?
Level 4 is where it gets more complex, blends of feeling. This is about recognizing and describing feelings that are different, maybe even opposed, happening at the same time. It's a big jump in sophistication because you're holding multiple emotional realities.
So like feeling bittersweet or excited and nervous.
Exactly. You might say, I feel sad about leaving, yet hopeful for what's next, or I'm excited about this promotion, but also a little nervous about the responsibility. You're seeing the tapestry, the complexity.
That feels much more like real life. Emotions rarely come one at a time.
They really don't. And then the highest level, level 5, is blends of feeling. This is deep emotional wisdom. It's the capacity to appreciate complexity not just in your own feelings, but simultaneously in others. It involves seeing nuance, multiple dimensions, comparing feelings across situations. You can even imagine yourself in someone else's shoes, feeling what they might feel, without your own emotions biasing you too much. True empathy grounded in understanding.
Wow. Can you give an example of level 5?
Sure. Someone might say, I feel a mix of relief and some regret about making that big decision. And looking at my colleague, I can really see how they might feel both a bit betrayed by my leaving and cautiously optimistic about getting a chance to step up.
Okay, that's definitely a sophisticated understanding, seeing multiple complex layers in yourself and someone else. What strikes me about these levels is how they build. It's not like you ditch level 1 to get to level 5, right? It's more like adding layers.
That's exactly it. A nested hierarchy. Higher levels incorporate and modify the lower ones. You still feel the bodily sensations, level 1, but you can now interpret them with more nuance, level 3, 4, or 5. It leads to this progressively richer, more integrated understanding, like building a house, adding floors, not replacing them.
Makes sense. And how do we develop this? Is it just innate or is it learned?
It's definitely not just innate. It's significantly shaped by our early experiences, especially how our caretakers responded to us. It's interpersonally regulated, particularly in childhood. Think about a baby crying. The caretaker tunes in, tries to figure out, is it hunger, tiredness, pain? That process helps the child start to learn that these internal sensations mean something.
Ah, so the caregiver acts like an interpreter initially.
Exactly. And when the caregiver responds effectively, feeds the hungry baby, comforts the scared one, the baby gets a relief. This teaches them that distress is usually temporary and that help is possible. It builds foundational trust and security.
Okay, and then language comes in.
And language becomes a crucial tool. Words help us link those bodily sensations, level 1, with concepts, level 3 and up. These differentiated emotional experiences are almost like constructions built with the help of language. Current theory suggests the more your feelings are responded to non-verbally, and then talked about, dissected, explored in daily life, finding labels, understanding triggers, noticing body sensations, recognizing expressions, the more advanced your emotional awareness can become.
So talking about feelings with parents, friends, teachers really matter.
Immensely. Your capacity for emotional awareness grows right alongside your capacity for self-regulation. And generally, it increases throughout development. But how high you reach on that ladder really depends on the quality of those early social interactions and later ones in school, peer group, etc.
Okay, so if it develops like that, looking at us as adults, why do some people seem to find it much harder than others to reach those higher levels, like 4 or 5, even if they're trying? It feels like some people get stuck at level 2 or 3.
That's a really important question. And evolutionary psychology offers a potential framework here with the concept of life history strategy, or LHS. The idea is that our developmental path, including how we approach emotions and even how we think, gets calibrated early on based on our environment. Is it safe and predictable or harsh and uncertain?
So adapting to the world we grew up in.
Exactly. There are broadly 2 strategies. A fast life history strategy tends to develop in harsh, unpredictable environments. Think abuse, neglect, serious instability, maybe community violence. This strategy pushes towards short-term rewards, maybe less investment in long-term relationships, and less use of that deep, reflective thinking. It makes sense for survival there where the future is uncertain, but it can mean less opportunity or focus on learning the nuances of emotion. Immediate reaction might be more adaptive than deep reflection in that context.
Okay, survival mode prioritizes the short term. What's the other strategy?
The slow life history strategy. This develops in safer, more secure environments where resources, both material and psychological, are more available. In this context, there's usually an attuned, dependable caregiver providing empathy and helping the child learn what their internal signals mean. This environment supports long-term planning, goal setting, and the development of those more effortful cognitive processes, including deeper emotional awareness.
So fast LHS is about immediate survival. Slow LHS allows for long-term investment, including in emotional learning.
Pretty much. Now, the problem, the mismatch, can happen later if the strategy you learned in childhood doesn't fit your adult environment.
Like someone with a fast LHS background entering a very corporate, slow LHS type of workplace.
Exactly. Imagine a consultant who learned in childhood that expressing anger loudly and immediately was necessary to be heard or safe. Doing that when feeling unfairly treated in a professional meeting. Satisfying maybe for a second, fast strategy, but likely damaging long-term, slow strategy environment.
Right, because that nuanced emotional awareness and regulation is valuable in the slow LHS setting, where relationships and long-term goals matter.
Precisely. The cognitive investment in developing higher emotional awareness pays off in stable environments. But in highly volatile, unpredictable settings, maybe it doesn't offer enough benefit to justify the effort needed to acquire it. So this LHS framework helps explain those individual differences we see. It's not about better or worse, but about adaptation and potential mismatch.
Okay, that adds a whole other layer. So the takeaway from this part is, emotional awareness isn't just one thing. It's a developmental journey through these 5 levels, deeply shaped by our early life and environment. And understanding where you are and potentially why is key.
Counterintuitive twist. When naming emotions can impede regulation.
Okay, so far it seems pretty straightforward, doesn't it? Naming emotions is good, calms the brain, helps us understand ourselves, builds resilience. Sounds like a solid strategy.
That's the general picture.
But here's where we throw in that curveball. Some recent research introduces a really surprising, crucial nuance that challenges this common wisdom, especially about the immediate effects of naming. Things get a bit complicated now.
They do. There was a specific experimental study by Nook, Satpute, and Oxner that directly tested this. How does naming an emotion affect your ability to regulate it right afterwards? And what they found flew in the face of intuition, both lay intuition and some psychological theories. They found that emotion naming actually got in the way of using other regulation strategies like cognitive reappraisal, or mindful acceptance.
Wait, it impeded regulation? So people who named their feelings before trying to change them felt worse?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Participants who named their emotion right before trying to reappraise it reported feeling worse than those who just went straight to reappraising without the naming step.
Wow, that's not a small thing. That really suggests that saying how you feel might not always be the best first move if your goal is immediate regulation, if you want to shift that feeling right now.
It does challenge that sequence.
So my therapist might say name it, but this study suggests maybe hold off sometimes. That's definitely confusing for anyone who's learned the standard advice.
It is confusing because it adds this critical layer of context. The researchers came up with two main ideas, two hypotheses for why this might happen. First, the crystallization hypothesis. Remember how we talked about emotions being kind of constructed when sensations meet concepts?
Yeah.
Well, the act of generating and applying a specific name like anger or fear to what you're feeling might crystallize that state. It's like, imagine your feeling is still wet paint. Slapping a hard label on it might make it set faster, making it harder to then immediately paint over it with a different feeling through reappraisal or acceptance.
Yeah.
It could consolidate the initial interpretation tied to that word.
Okay, so putting a firm label on something fluid makes it less changeable in that immediate moment. Like fixing it in place, that's a really clear image.
Exactly. It solidifies it, potentially making it resistant to immediate change. The second idea is the resource depletion hypothesis. Basically, naming your emotions, especially when you have to generate the label yourself rather than just pick one from a list, takes mental effort. It's cognitively demanding.
Okay.
And both naming and regulating emotions use resources in the prefrontal cortex, that brain region, for effortful control. Think of it like having a limited budget of mental energy.
Right, like a battery.
Exactly. If you spend a chunk of that energy figuring out and articulating, okay, I am feeling profoundly disappointed and slightly betrayed right now, you might have less energy immediately available for the next demanding task, which is changing that feeling through regulation. So naming first might deplete the resources needed for the regulation right after.
That makes total sense too. Cognitive load. Do one heavy lift, less power for the next immediate one. But hang on, this seems to contradict all those earlier studies on affect labeling that did show benefits, like reduced distress. What's different here?
That's the crucial distinction, and it really highlights the nuance. It comes down to what was being labeled and how. In this study where naming impeded regulation, participants were generating and saying their own emotional response to negative images like, I feel sad or I feel disgust. The focus was squarely on their internal feeling they were constructing the label for.
Okay. Labeling their own subjective feeling.
Right. Now, in many of the earlier studies showing benefits from affect labeling, the task was often different. Participants might be shown, say, an angry face, and they had to choose the label anger, or see a picture of a spider and label it spider.
So labeling the thing causing the feeling, or picking a provided label, not necessarily generating a label for their own complex internal state.
Exactly. The focus was often more on the external stimulus, or a more general categorization, not necessarily the person's own self-generated, nuanced emotional response to that stimulus.
I see. That's a huge difference.
It really is. And the implication is significant. Labeling external things, or choosing from preset labels, might have different, perhaps more immediately helpful effects than generating your own label for your own internal state right before you try to actively change that state using another method.
Okay, so it's the target of the label, internal versus external, and how the label is generated, self-generated versus provided. That clarifies things a lot.
Yeah, the type of labeling and its immediate goal really seem to matter.
So this brings us right back to the practical side. If saying how I feel isn't always the best first step for immediate regulation afterwards, when is naming helpful, and when might it actually hinder us in that moment?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And it's all about context and purpose. This study challenges the idea that therapy is always more effective if you first name the feeling, especially if active regulation is supposed to happen right away. For instance, there's other research suggesting that encouraging people to thoroughly describe their feelings immediately after a traumatic event can sometimes lead to worse outcomes.
Really? Worse outcomes?
Yeah, it seems in certain very acute high-distress situations, forcing immediate verbalization might not be the most helpful thing for immediate stabilization. Sometimes space might be needed first.
Okay, that makes sense in extreme cases.
But, and this is really important, all the benefits of naming we talked about earlier are still completely valid. They just might operate in different contexts or over different time frames. So naming is still incredibly valuable for long-term self-awareness and understanding. absolutely crucial. Naming helps when you reflect later, over time, gaining insight. It's about deep understanding, not instant fixing.
Right, processing afterward.
For creating a narrative.
Yeah.
Very useful when you integrate emotions into a story, like through journaling or expressive writing. It helps make sense of things retrospectively. For talking to others. Essential for social regulation. Telling someone I feel hurt because
Hmm.
helps them understand and support you.
Okay, communication.
For complex feelings, really helpful for untangling those messy, blended emotions we experience in real life, not just simple reactions to lab images, for building emotional literacy. Still vital, expanding your vocabulary beyond good, bad, mad, sad is fundamental for overall emotional intelligence.
So it's not that naming is bad, it's about when and why you're doing it. The key takeaway seems to be the power of name it to tame it depends on the context. For instant shifts, maybe goes straight to regulation. For everything else, long-term understanding, communication, literacy, deep, nuanced naming is gold.
Synthesizing the insights in your emotional toolkit.
Okay, let's try and pull this all together. We've got what feels like two competing ideas. Name it to tame it works, it's backed by neuroscience, but also naming emotions right before trying to regulate them immediately might make things worse. That feels like a bit of a contradiction. How do we make sense of this for ourselves, for your emotional toolkit listener? How do we navigate this apparent paradox?
Yeah, it can feel contradictory, but the synthesis really comes down to clarifying the purpose, the timing, and the type of naming you're engaging in. We can think of maybe three guiding principles for using this tool. Principle 1, purpose is immediate regulation. Maybe pause naming. If your goal is right now, acute emotional regulation, like reappraising a sudden surge of anger or accepting a wave of anxiety in the moment, then jumping straight to your chosen regulation strategy, deep breathing, reframing, etc., might be more effective. In those specific intense moments, generating a name first could crystallize the feeling or use up the mental energy you need for the regulation itself.
So for a quick fix, maybe bypass the label for a second.
Potentially, yes. Principle 2, purpose is deeper understanding. Name away. But if your goal is deeper self-awareness, building long-term emotional literacy, communicating effectively with others, or making sense of complex layered feelings over time, then naming emotions, especially with nuance and precision, thinking back to those levels of awareness, is profoundly beneficial. It gives you data for reflection, problem-solving, adaptation. It builds self-awareness, communication skills, self-advocacy.
Okay, so naming for insight and communication is always good.
Right. And principle 3, naming is the taming. Finally, remember that sometimes the act of naming itself is the primary regulation tool being used. When you simply name the feeling to create that psychological distance and shift brain activity, that is the taming, like your traffic jam example. The naming itself was the intervention.
So it depends if naming is step one before another strategy or if naming is the strategy.
Exactly. It's not about good versus bad, but about knowing which tool to use, when, and how for the specific emotional job at hand.
That distinction is incredibly helpful. It really clarifies things. Okay, so speaking of the toolkit, what practical techniques can you, listening now, actually use day to day to boost emotional awareness and regulation, keeping all this nuance in mind?
Consistency is key here. Remember, practicing these things actually rewires your brain, strengthens those pathways, builds that linguistic resilience. It helps turn that feeling of emotional chaos into something more manageable over time. So here are some actionable strategies you can try. First, pause and check in. Seriously, schedule it if you have to. Just take moments throughout the day. 30 seconds is fine to pause and ask, what am I feeling right now? Anything happened today that might be influencing this? And really important, where do I feel this in my body? So many of us just power through until we explode or shut down. This regular check-in is foundational.
Like a little emotional pit stop.
Exactly. Second, notice physical sensations. Emotions live in the body. Tuning into those physical cues is powerful. Tight chest, racing heart for anxiety. Clenched jaw, tight shoulders for anger. If you can't find the emotion word, start with sensation. Is it hot, cold, buzzy, heavy? What's the physical signature? Third, use the I feel formula. This is structured but effective. I feel emotion named because reason trigger. It helps separate the feeling from the story or thought. Instead of I'm stressed, try I feel anxious because I have 3 deadlines looming, or I feel overwhelmed because I'm not sure how to start this task. Specificity helps.
Separates the feeling from the situation.
Precisely. Fourth, reflect on triggers. If you're feeling something strong and don't know why, backtrack. What just happened? Did someone say something? Have I felt this way before in similar situations? Understanding your triggers is super empowering. It helps you anticipate, prepare, or maybe even avoid getting overwhelmed next time. Fifth, Expand your emotional vocabulary. Don't stop at mad, sad, glad, scared. Get a feelings wheel online. They're great visual tools. See if irritated, resentful, or betrayed fits better than just mad.
Dig deeper than the basic label.
Exactly. Or use the arousal valence matrix. Where are you on the energy scale, high-low arousal? And where on the pleasant-pleasant scale, valence and terror? High arousal and pleasant might be anger or fear. Low arousal and pleasant could be sadness or boredom. Knowing this helps you choose what to do, maybe deep breaths for high arousal, or getting up and moving for low arousal boredom.
That matrix sounds really useful for figuring out what action to take.
It can be. Sixth, pair deep breathing with physical descriptors. Don't just breathe. Breathe into the sensation. Inhale, count of 4, hold briefly. Mentally scan shoulders tight, stomach fluttering, then exhale slowly, count of 6, while repeating that specific descriptor. Research shows pairing breath work with specific physical terms calms you down faster, like 22% faster than generic relaxation. Seventh, use mindful self-talk as curious observation. Shift from judgment, I'm angry again, to curiosity. Noticing heat rising, maybe frustration about that boundary being crossed. Yeah. Or stomach's tight. Okay, that's anxiety about the meeting. It validates the feeling without judgment, creates space, and rewires the brain towards observation, not reaction.
Be a scientist of your own feelings.
Kind of. Eighth, journaling. Seriously, one of the best tools. Regularly write down how you felt, what happened. Freeform or use prompts. Structured journals like the anxiety check-in can help. It creates this amazing log of your emotional landscape over time, revealing patterns you'd otherwise miss. Ninth, use stories and images. If words are hard, use other prompts. How do characters in novels, movies, comics experience emotion? How do certain photos make you feel? Reflecting on why a character's despair resonates or why a particular scene evokes joy can connect you back to your own feelings.
Using external things to understand the internal.
Exactly. And finally, 10th, teach emotional awareness, even explaining it to kids. Model it. I feel frustrated because I lost my keys. Help them label, you look sad. Is it because your toy broke? Use feeling charts. Encourage I feel statements. Teaching reinforces your own understanding immensely.
Those are all fantastic, concrete tools. But what if someone listening is really struggling with this? Like they try, but they just hit a wall when it comes to identifying or talking about emotions. It's not always easy.
You're absolutely right. It isn't easy for everyone, and there are real barriers. Let's talk through a few common ones and some strategies. If you tend towards emotional suppression, maybe you learn feelings are weak or bad. Consciously create safe outlets, journaling, a trusted friend, a therapist. Actively challenge those old beliefs. Start small. Notice and name low-intensity feelings first, like slight annoyance or mild pleasure. Build the muscle gradually. If you struggle about emotions, alexithymia, difficulty going beyond good or bad, focus on vocabulary building. Emotion wheel, word lists. Really tune into body sensations. What does sad feel like physically for you? Try drawing or using metaphors. Sometimes a picture or comparison works better than a word.
Like drawing the knot in your stomach.
Exactly. If you fear the emotions themselves, maybe you worry sadness or anger will overwhelm you. Remind yourself, emotions are temporary visitors, not permanent residents. Approach them with curiosity. What's this feeling trying to tell me? Instead of judgment or fear. Take breaks if it feels like too much. Process in small doses. If you experience emotional numbing from trauma, trauma can cause disconnection as a protective shield. Reconnecting needs to be gentle and gradual. Start with subtle feelings. Engage your senses, music, nature, textures to reconnect with your body first. And please, seek support from a trauma-informed therapist who understands how to navigate this safely.
That's really important advice for trauma survivors.
Crucial. If you're more emotionally reactive than aware, you feel things intensely but react impulsively, maybe regretting it later. The key is the pause. Breathe before reacting. Delay your response. Identify the specific trigger. Separate your thoughts, they hate me, from your feelings. I feel rejected and hurt. Use name it to tame it, specifically to process the feeling, not act on it instantly. And underlying all this, lack of self-compassion. This is huge. We judge ourselves constantly for feeling wrong. Practice self-compassion. Acknowledge all emotions are valid signals. Talk to yourself like you would a struggling friend with kindness, not criticism. Use soothing statements. It's okay to feel this, I'm learning. This acceptance is fundamental.
Treating yourself with kindness through the process, that seems essential. Okay, so zooming out again, what's the ultimate payoff here? Why should people commit to this sometimes difficult ongoing journey of building emotional awareness and regulation? What are the big long-term rewards?
Oh, the long-term rewards are profound. Emotional regulation isn't just about feeling better moment to moment. It's a foundational skill that elevates pretty much every area of your life. Think about improved mental health and reduced stress. You prevent emotional overwhelm because you process feelings as they come. This reduces anxiety, stops you from endlessly ruminating on negative thoughts, builds healthier coping skills, and makes you much more resilient.
So less chance of burnout or chronic anxiety.
Exactly. Then there are stronger, healthier relationships. Regulation prevents lashing out. It boosts empathy because understanding your own feelings helps you understand others. It fosters open, honest communication and deeper connection. You handle disagreements better. Also, better decision-making and problem-solving. Less reactivity means more rational thinking, even when emotions are high. You avoid impulsive, self-sabotaging choices driven by unmanaged feelings. You make clearer, more aligned decisions.
Thinking straighter under pressure.
Right. And greater emotional resilience and self-awareness. You bounce back better from setbacks. You become more flexible in your responses. You develop more self-compassion and a growth mindset, seeing challenges as opportunities to learn, not just threats. There's even enhanced physical health. We know the mind-body connection is real. Managing emotions lowers stress hormones like cortisol, improves sleep, reduces the risk of stress-related illnesses like heart problems or digestive issues. It boosts overall vitality.
Better physical health, too. That's often overlooked.
Definitely. And finally, it fuels lifelong emotional growth and self-development. This journey deepens your self-understanding continuously. It helps you align your life with your values, pursue meaningful goals with more confidence, and ultimately fosters a richer sense of purpose and fulfillment. It's an investment that keeps paying dividends. Outro.
So at the end of the day, emotional mastery isn't about trying to eliminate feelings or force yourself into constant happiness, which is impossible anyway. It's really about building that self-awareness, sharpening those regulation skills, and cultivating resilience. It's so your emotions become helpful guides, providing valuable information rather than overwhelming obstacles, viewing them as data, not directives, and, as you said, treating yourself with compassion along the way.
Exactly. Remember, every single moment you choose to consciously engage with your emotions, whether you're naming them precisely, exploring their different layers, or simply allowing yourself to observe them without judgment, you're actively strengthening a powerful and essential life skill. This practice truly is a journey of continuous growth with benefits that ripple through your entire life. So the question for you, listening, is, what will you name today?